Hey everyone, so you want to learn about how to coach sales teams, huh? Well, we've got some really interesting stuff to go over with you today. I think we've all been there.
Absolutely.
Whether we're new to leadership or just want to help our teams kind of reach that next level.
You know what's so fascinating about sales leadership is that it's kind of counterintuitive.
Oh, really?
Because it's not about micromanaging every single deal. It's about cultivating a coaching mindset, one that really empowers your sales.
Oh, I like that. Empowerment.
Yeah, to really thrive on their own.
Okay, so the stuff you sent me, it starts off with this case study about a sales manager named Sophie.
Okay.
At a tech company, TechnoZ.
Right.
And her big challenge is basically figuring out how to lead without constantly, giving orders.
That's a really common hurdle for new leaders.
Yeah.
They often feel like they need to have all the answers, but actually the magic happens when you empower your team to find their own solutions.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So there's a great example of this in the material with one of her salespeople, Mark.
Okay.
He's dealing with a tough client, pushing back on pricing. So instead of telling Mark what to do, she poses this question. How do you plan to approach Enterprise X's resistance to our new pricing?
Right. There's that one question. It just shifts the whole dynamic because you're moving away from that top-down approach.
Right.
And you're inviting Mark into this collaborative problem-solving process.
Which is so powerful, for his development too, right? Instead of just following instructions, he's actually flexing those muscles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the results, they speak for themselves. Not only does Mark find, a really creative solution that works for the client,
right,
but he comes away feeling more capable and confident.
Yeah, I love that. So we see what effective coaching looks like there. But then there's also kind of a cautionary tale in here about Thomas.
Okay.
At CRM Solutions. He's the classic kind of, wants to control everything.
Oh, the micromanager.
Right. He wants to dictate every move.
It's tempting to fall into that, especially when you're new, or you feel that pressure to get those results quickly.
Right.
But this material shows how that can really backfire.
So his whole team ends up demotivated, super reliant on him for every decision.
Right, because they know that Thomas will swoop in.
Right. They stop thinking for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stifles their creativity, their growth, their initiative.
So how do we avoid becoming a Thomas, right?
Well,
hopefully this material has some answers.
I think so, yeah.
So they give this 5-step coaching framework.
Okay.
Which, honestly, it's surprisingly straightforward.
I think that simplicity is often the key to effects.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, this framework, it's designed to be easy to implement, to understand.
Right.
But there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Okay, let's dive into those 5 steps then.
Okay.
Step 1 is connecting and clarifying.
Yes.
What's the key here?
I think this first step is all about kind of setting the stage for a successful coaching conversation.
Right.
You start with building rapport, that human connection that makes people feel seen and heard. It could be as simple as asking them about their weekend, a shared interest, or even just acknowledging something they've accomplished.
It's like you're saying, hey, I see you.
Exactly.
As a person, not just a number.
Yeah.
And then you clarify the goal of the session.
Yes.
Right.
And the way you frame this is crucial. It's about using neutral language that encourages collaboration, not judgment.
Right. So instead of saying you did this wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. You might say something like, hey, let's debrief that call.
Right.
Or let's discuss how your client meetings went this week.
Right. It's all about setting that tone of we're in this together.
Exactly.
Okay. Step 2 is where we compare perceptions.
Yes. This is where active listening comes.
Active listening. That sounds like a buzzword, but
it is.
What does it actually look like in practice?
Well, it's about truly putting aside your own biases, assumptions, and just focusing on understanding the other perspective.
Okay.
You want to give your salesperson the space to speak first.
Right.
Share their take. Ask open-ended questions like, how did that call go from your point?
So you're resisting the urge to jump in, and you're giving them the floor.
Right.
Okay.
Then, once they've shared their thoughts, you can offer your own options.
Right.
But the key here is constructive feedback, not criticism. So not, you completely messed up that presentation.
More like, I noticed that in the presentation, the client seemed a little disengaged at times. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're acknowledging what you observed without placing blame. And you're inviting them to to think about it from a different perspective.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, step 3 is all about considering obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of obstacles are we talking about here?
This step delves into the root cause of what's hindering the salesperson's performance. And again, you start by letting the salesperson lead the conversation. You might ask, what do you think is the biggest obstacle standing in the way of you hitting your target?
So instead of like assuming you know what it is,
Exactly.
having them identify it.
Exactly. And then once they've shared, you can, add your perspective.
Right.
But again, it's a collaborative process.
Right, it's a discussion.
It's not a lecture.
Okay.
You might say something like, it seems like a lack of preparation before calls is an obstacle. What are your thoughts on that?
Right, we're working together to understand the challenge.
Yes, and that shared understanding is really crucial for the next step, which is where we start building to eliminate the obstacle.
Okay, so now the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
We're moving from analysis to action.
Exactly. And here, the salesperson takes the reins again. You want them to come up with potential solutions.
Right.
You might say something like, what steps could you take to better prepare for those calls?
Okay.
So you're guiding them to find those solutions themselves.
Right, not dictating the answer.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can add value by sharing your experience, offering support, brainstorming ideas.
Yeah, and I love how in this step, the material emphasizes the importance of practice, like role-playing.
Oh, absolutely.
To help salespeople kind of,
Practice is essential.
solidify that learning.
Turning knowledge into action.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it allows them to apply those solutions in a safe environment and then go out in the field and do it.
That makes sense. Okay, step 5, commit to action.
Yes.
This is where we solidify those next steps, make sure it actually translates into something, right?
Absolutely. The focus here is on concrete actions.
Okay.
So you might ask, so what specific steps are you committing to better prepare for those calls moving forward?
So not just vague intentions, but really concrete, actionable steps.
Exactly. And then you can, as a coach, you can summarize those commitments.
Okay.
Ensure everyone's on the same page. You can even put it in writing.
Well, good idea.
To create that accountability.
Yeah. And then, of course, you end with a note of encouragement.
Of course.
Let them know you believe in them.
Right. That encouragement makes all the difference.
I love this framework. It emphasizes empowerment at every stage.
Exactly.
It's not about the manager having the answers. It's about, guiding them to their own solutions.
It's about cultivating growth from within.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
I know there's so much.
There's so much more.
More to explore.
You have like active listening.
Yes.
In more detail.
Yeah.
And there's this great story.
Yes.
About a manager who totally transformed your team.
Yes. Fascinating.
With a really simple yet powerful philosophy.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into those next layers.
Yeah, me too.
Before the break, we were talking about that 5-step framework.
Right.
But this material also offers a lot of other little nuggets about sales leadership.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, this whole idea of being soft on people, hard on problems.
Yeah,
that really resonated with me. I can see how powerful that could be.
It really can be. And it can transform your entire team culture, basically.
Yeah.
People make mistakes. Right.
Right.
It's going to happen.
It's inevitable.
So instead of focusing on blame,
right,
you shift the focus to understanding the problem and finding solutions together.
It's not about like letting people off the hook. It's just about creating that safe space for people to
to acknowledge those mistakes, learn from them, and grow.
Yeah. But what about the hard on problem side?
Well, it means you address those problems head on.
Okay.
You don't just brush them under the rug.
Right.
You confront them directly.
Right.
But you do it in a way that's focused on finding solutions.
Right.
Not placing blame.
Right.
So it's about being empathetic.
Yeah.
But also decisive.
So you acknowledge the human element, but you also hold people accountable.
Exactly. And there's a great example of this in the material at CloudSecure.
Okay.
They adopted this approach.
Right.
And they saw some really impressive results. 30% increase in sales 6 months.
Wow.
And a big boost in team morale.
I love that. So it creates this environment where people feel supported.
Right.
But also challenged.
Yeah. They feel safe to take risks, experiment.
Okay. So this is resonating a lot with me. Okay. Let's shift gears a bit to talk about active listening.
Okay.
Feels like one of those things that can really
fundamental.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can
make or break those coaching relationships.
Absolutely. Remember that anecdote about Leah at DataViz?
Oh, yeah. I loved that story.
Yeah.
Tell me more about her approach.
So Leah realized that by consistently giving her salespeople the space to talk before she offered her opinion, she was getting these really valuable insights.
Makes sense.
She was tapping into those unique experiences and perspectives.
Yeah, your salespeople are the ones on the front lines.
Exactly. They're the ones
seeing everything,
dealing with those day-to-day challenges.
Right. And sometimes they have ideas that we might not even think of.
Right. Exactly. And by truly listening to what they're saying, but also how they're saying it.
Right.
You can uncover these gems of wisdom, that collective intelligence of your team.
Yeah, so it's not just about hearing the words.
It's not paying attention to all those. It's about being fully present, putting your own agenda aside.
Okay.
And really focusing on understanding their perspective.
Okay, I get it, but how do we actually get better at any tips?
Sure. First, eliminate those distractions.
Okay.
Phone away.
Right.
Laptop closed. Create a space.
Let's set the stage.
For a truly focused content.
Okay.
Second, don't jump in with solutions right away.
Okay.
Even if there's a pause, let them finish.
Don't think.
Give them that space.
Right.
Third, reflect back what you've heard.
Okay.
Paraphrase and acknowledge those emotions. Make sure you're really understanding.
So what I'm hearing is you're feeling frustrated because you didn't have clear goals for this project. Is that right?
Exactly. That just shows them that you're really trying to
understand. I like that. It really builds that trust and respect.
That's so important for effective.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about being soft on people, hard on problems.
Yes.
And we've explored active listening.
Right.
It feels like we're putting together kind of what it takes to be a really effective sales coach.
Yeah.
But how do we actually tailor our approach to, each person? Because they're all different.
That's a great question, and it's a crucial part of coaching.
Yeah.
Because there's no one size fits all approach.
So how do we do that? How do we tailor it? It seems like it takes a lot of observation and really getting to know your team.
It starts with understanding their goals.
Yeah.
What drives them.
Right.
You got to take the time to ask questions.
Right.
And really listen.
It's like detective work almost.
It really is.
You're gathering all these clues to understand what makes each person tick.
Exactly. And once you have that understanding, then you can tailor your approach.
Yeah.
Someone newer to the team, maybe give them more structure, more guidance. But a seasoned pro, maybe give them more autonomy.
Yeah, freedom to experiment.
Exactly.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yes, that sweet spot.
Right.
Between support and autonomy.
And I think this is where that whole soft on people, hard on problems really comes into play.
Totally.
It creates that safe space to
to
learn and grow.
You're not afraid
without fear of judgment.
Make those mistakes.
Right.
It's also important to remember it's not just about addressing weaknesses.
Right.
It's also about amplifying strengths.
Oh, I like
What are those unique talents
Yeah.
that can help them really succeed?
So like you have a salesperson who's really charismatic,
Yes.
amazing rapport,
Yeah.
but they struggle with closing deals.
Right.
So you help them identify how to use that charisma
Right.
to overcome those objections.
Exactly. Turn those strengths into superpowers.
I love that. So it's not about fixing what's broken.
No.
It's about unlocking potential.
Now, coaching isn't always easy. You're dealing with different personalities,
Right.
different skill levels, different motivations.
Right. There's going to be times when we encounter resistance, pushback, frustration.
That's when your commitment to coaching is really tested.
You have to remind yourself why you're doing this.
Exactly.
We're doing this because we believe in our team.
Yes.
We know that.
We want to see them succeed.
Right. Investing in them is how we unlock those results.
It's how you become the best leader you can be.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make sure those coaching conversations translate into results? How do we set those expectations and hold people accountable, but not micromanage?
Well, those conversations are great.
Right.
But you also need follow-through.
Right.
So how do we do that? It's about setting clear expectations, specific action steps, and then you have those regular check-ins to monitor progress, offer support, feedback.
Right. So it's not micromanaging.
No.
It's about creating
a culture of accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might say something like, hey, I trust you to handle this project, but let's touch base next week, see how it's going, offer any support you need.
Right. And that conveys both trust and accountability.
All about balance.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This is making a lot of sense. So, earlier we talked about that question, what coaching conversation can you have with your team this week?
Right. A great way to get people thinking.
Yeah. So I want to add on to that. Think about the challenges your team is facing right now.
Yeah.
Could be hitting those quarterly targets, whatever it is.
Right.
And now, how can you apply these principles?
Yes.
Active listening, soft on people, hard on problems, tailoring your approach.
That's how you bridge that gap between theory and practice.
Makes sense.
Take these concepts and make them actionable.
Yeah. And as you kind of go on this journey, remember it's a process.
Yep.
There's going to be ups and downs.
Absolutely.
But each conversation you have, you're building a stronger team and you're developing your own leadership skills too.
Now, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Ooh, hit me with it.
Okay. Think about the most successful coach you've ever had.
Yeah.
Could be sports, could be a mentor, could be a teacher, anyone who helped you reach your potential.
Okay.
What made them so effective?
I love that question. It makes you really think.
What were those qualities, and how can you embody them in your own approach to coaching? Because at the end of the day, effective coaching, it's so much more than hitting targets.
It's about those connections, and
it's about empowering people.
Yeah,
fostering growth.
Yeah, I love that.
Building those connections that go beyond the workplace.
So lead with empathy, listen with intention, and believe in your team.
Believe in your team.
This has been great. I'm feeling so much more prepared.
I'm glad to hear that.
To really up my coaching game.
Remember, it's a journey.
Right.
It takes practice.
Yeah.
A willingness to keep learning and a genuine desire to help people unlock their potential.
Yeah, and the rewards are huge.
Oh, yeah. You'll see the results.
Not just on your team's performance, but also like just personally too, right?
You'll feel that satisfaction of helping others achieve their goals. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of sales coaching.
And keep those coaching conversations going. So we've covered some really great like foundational stuff.
We have.
This mindset of being soft on people, hard on problems, active listening.
Yeah.
But let's get tactical.
Okay.
What are some actual techniques that we can use in those coaching conversations to make them, really effective?
Well, one of the most powerful tools is asking the right questions.
Okay, yeah, the material definitely talked about that a lot.
Yes, it's not about giving all the answers.
Right.
It's about guiding them to find those answers themselves.
So what makes a question, like, effective?
Well, they need to spark deeper thinking, self-discovery.
Yeah.
So they should be open-ended, not just a yes or no.
Right. So instead of asking, like, did that sales call go well?
Right. Yeah. You might ask, what were the key takeaways from that call? What went well and what could have been even better?
Right. So they have to actually think about it.
Exactly.
Don't just give you...
They're taking ownership
yes or no
of their development.
I like that.
And effective questions, they're also non-judgmental.
Okay.
You're creating that safe space so they can share.
Right. So they don't feel attacked.
Exactly. So instead of saying, why did you handle that objection that way?
Right. Which
can sound accusatory.
Yeah.
You could ask, what was going through your mind when the client raised that objection? What options did you consider?
Right.
You see the difference.
Yeah. It's subtle, but
it's huge.
It's a totally different vibes.
And lastly, those powerful coaching questions, they're future-oriented.
Okay.
They help them move on from the past.
Right.
And focus on, what they can do differently next time.
So instead of, why didn't you close that deal?
Right. It's what steps can you take to increase your chances of closing similar deals in the future?
Okay, I'm writing all this down.
It's an art. It takes practice, but it's so worth it.
Okay, this is great.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about feedback. Giving constructive feedback.
Yeah.
The material talked about how that can be tricky.
It is, but it's so essential.
Right.
For growth. And the key is to do it thoughtfully.
Okay.
So one thing to remember, focus on behaviors, not personalities.
So you're not assertive enough.
Right.
Which can feel like a personal attack.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. You're saying more like, hey, I noticed during the presentation, you kind of hesitated to address the client's concerns.
Yes.
How could you approach that differently next time?
Exactly. You're giving specific, observable feedback. You're focusing on the action.
It's not an attack.
Exactly. And it's also important to be solution-oriented.
Right. So you point out the area for growth.
Right. And then you follow up with a question.
Okay.
What steps can we take to improve this?
So they're part of that solution.
Exactly.
They're not just being told what to do.
It's collaborative.
Okay.
But feedback, even constructive feedback, it can be met with resistance.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, nobody likes to be told
that
they're doing something wrong.
No, it's natural.
So how do we deal with that?
I think it comes down to trust.
Okay.
If you have a good relationship
Yeah.
with your team,
Right. They feel safe.
they're going to be more open to hearing it, even if it's not all positive.
Right. Because they know.
You're coming from a good place. Exactly. And remember, feedback is a two-way street.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Ask for their input.
Right.
Be willing to adjust your approach.
Okay. So it's a conversation, not a lecture.
Right. And sometimes the best feedback is a question.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Instead of saying, you did this wrong.
Right.
You might just ask, what are your thoughts on how that meeting went?
Right. So they have to
reflect
govern their own performance.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about these questions, this feedback.
Oh,
how do we kind of like create a plan around all this?
Okay, so this is where you take all those insights, all those observations, and you turn them into a roadmap for success. A good coaching plan, it's tailored to each person.
It's not, you're not using the same plan for every single person.
To that person.
Right, so it takes into account their goals.
Exactly, their challenge.
Okay.
And it outlines those specific areas for development.
Okay.
Sets expectations, establishes establishes a timeline for progress, and it should be a living document.
Okay, so it's evolving. So it starts with like a conversation, right?
Yes, you sit down, you ask them about their goals, their aspirations, their challenges.
So you really understand their vision.
Right. And then you start identifying those skills, that knowledge they need to develop. Then you brainstorm those strategies, resources, action steps.
Right, like maybe they need to attend a chat or someone.
Maybe read a book.
Right, okay.
And I think celebrating those wins along the way.
Oh, yeah, that's huge,
is really important. It's motivating.
Right, it reinforces those behaviors.
Exactly.
Okay, wow, this has been...
I know we've covered a lot.
So insightful.
But remember, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It takes practice and that willingness to learn.
Yeah, and a desire to help your people really reach their potential.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. You'll see a positive impact, not just on your team's performance,
right,
but also personally.
You'll feel good too.
You'll feel that satisfaction of helping others.
That's awesome.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into sales coaching. Until next time.
Yes, keep learning.
And growing.
And keep those coaching conversations going.
Yes, absolutely.